All right, guys. This is the training. I'm Dr. Martin Wesley with the University of the Cumberlands and a member of the board of the LPC board. Just let me know if you guys can hear me. The best way is probably just chat on the side if you can. Just say yes, I can hear you, or I'm good. That's all of those are good. So. All right, at least Jennifer can hear me. How about, there we go, Cecilia. Sounds good. Georgiana, thank you. Yeah, and I know some of you are on the phone and probably can't chat with us, but anyways, feel free to also, especially those that are on the phone, feel free to email questions that you might have throughout this to Dawn Wesley, and she can relay that to me while I'm doing the training. But otherwise, everyone feel free to just chat on the side and ask your questions. Here's the deal, guys. I'd be glad to really open it up and we have a full chat going on, an audio chat or even video audio chat. But the problem is many times people aren't really prepared for this format, and they often, thanks, John, and they often they get that feedback going, and it's really hard for everyone else. So just to make it easier, especially when you have a lot of people, it's just best that we do it this way. So the people that are on the phone, of course, are not able, well, maybe they are, maybe they're doing both, but they can see hopefully they can see the PowerPoint as well as hear me through the phone. So either way. Also, the main thing here is that we have a record of who's attending, and Dawn just needs to know that so she can report that to the board and also send you your CEU certificate for that. So anyways, that's a little introduction to trying to do what we're doing. So the goal right now is that we go through this training for the next 3 hours, I guess, and maybe a little less, hopefully, and then Dawn will send you your certificate by mail. She will also be sending by email, excuse me. And so it'll be there maybe later today or tomorrow. And she will also be sending the spreadsheet of the training to like I said, the LPC board. So again, make sure that you're listed in the training. If you have missed any information or anything, make sure that Dawn has that information, okay? Sound good? Now, let me just again tell you sort of how this works. In one sense is, I'm losing my voice, that's one thing. But again, the chat is available on the side, and for those of you that are on the phone, feel free to email Dawn for anything. But one thing that I have found through these trainings is sometimes, a glitch happens, whatever, and our internet goes out. Now that's not very often, but it has happened in the past. So sometimes I'm like talking away for 5 minutes and everyone's disconnected. So please, yeah, thanks, George. If at all possible, throw me a question or something on occasion, just so I know that you guys are alive and listening. It helps me out a little bit. It also helps to know, that if you have a question, I'm sure others do too. But anyways, on occasion, I'll just say something like, or ask a question, something like, so does that make sense? Or does that sound good? Or whatever the case is. And in that case, sometimes I'm just asking for a little feedback to make sure everyone's alive, and listening. I just hate that when like I said, the internet goes down and I'm just talking to the computer. Does that make sense? So anyways, just say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Thanks, George. But anyways, I've learned doing these trainings or other type trainings over time to be able to multitask a little bit online. So if you have questions on the side, I can see those, and I'm pretty good at responding them as we go through. Let's see. We should have maybe a few more coming on board, but in general, we got a decent group right now. Yeah, this is actually quite a low group turnout for us, which is actually sort of nice in some ways. Many times when we do these trainings, we got 30 or 40 people in them, so just having 10, 12 people will be sort of nice. Okay, now again, if you're online, you see the screen, and you can respond in that way. Excuse me. Let's, like any. Well, actually, let me introduce myself again a little bit right now. As far as me, I've been on the board now for 4 years, the LPC board. Right now I'm a professor and dean at the School of Counseling at the University of Cumberland. We have a Master of Arts in Professional Counseling that also has 2 tracks, one clinical mental health counseling as well as addiction counseling. They're both designed to help the person become an LPCC, but also the one, of course, has got an addiction side to it. We also have a PhD program in counselor education and supervision. So that's sort of my primary day job, but at the same time I'm quite active on the board as well. And it says on the PowerPoint here, chair, but that's not true. I've been the chair for the last couple years, but I can't be on for more than 2 years. So anyways, I'm not on this year. But anyways, if again you have any questions about supervision or even about the board or anything like that, feel free to ask that. Now, one thing I'll give you my email address. I guess I put it up there earlier. Feel free to hold on to that. All right, thanks, John. Appreciate it. And my email address is available to you, and feel free to ask me anything, anytime. I mean, there's a lot of questions people have about counseling in general, or they may have about the board or how a person can become a counselor, or whatever the case is. I'm more than willing to try to answer your questions anyways. The only problem with that is sometimes you might ask a question that I really is best for me not to answer, or I don't have the answer, and that happens too. Sometimes I'll try to find the answer for you, and sometimes I might refer you to someone else. A lot of people have been asking me a lot about the Medicaid billing and all right now, and honestly, I just haven't got into it too much. I helped get it going for LPCs and all, but I've been sort of out of the loop lately. I'm quite active with other things. So anyways, that I might refer you to the Medicaid people here in Kentucky, but otherwise, most questions I can try to answer for you. All right, well, let me, like any good professor, I'm going to give you a test. How does that sound? You didn't realize that you were going to take a test today, but it's not anything too heavy. Let me see what we can do. Let's see. I'm looking here for an audience poll. There we go. How about something nice and simple? A nice question that hopefully everyone can answer. So here we go. How about this? It says, all counselors require ongoing support and training. And just answer true or false. And again, this one's a fairly simple one. Excuse me. And in general, most of you answered true. And yeah, all counselors require some kind of ongoing support, right? There is something within all of us. The point where we believe that we've arrived. You know, now that we're an LPCC and maybe have 2 years of being in that position, we feel that, hey, you know, I can't learn anymore. That's the problem. In fact, there's actually some good research related to that. Some of the best counselors out there are actually the associate counselors that feel like, hey, I got to learn. I got to keep the edge up. I've got to continue to find new ways to help my client. Those are the best therapists out there. The ones that get a little jaded and feel like maybe that they've learned all they can learn, that's a problem. So yes, obviously all of us as counselors do require ongoing support and training. And that's for you as a supervisor to help provide that, but also for you as a counselor, as a supervisor to learn as well. We all need that. And of course, somewhat that's for CEUs to help with, but at the same time, hopefully we're reading and studying on our own as well. All right, well, let me throw another one out at you. How about this? Counseling supervision is the same as counseling. What do you think there? Go ahead and put in your thoughts. Counseling supervision is the same as counseling. Okay, well, again, we got a good group here, and most of you answered false. Yeah, it's not the same. I mean, there is an element of sometimes counseling involved with supervision, or that we act as a counselor sometimes to come alongside our supervisee. But at the same time, in general, you know, it's very different. We don't have a treatment plan, for example, with our supervisee. That's not the goal. We have very different goals. We're not there to help them with their mental health. We're there to help them grow and to help be a better counselor. So they are different roles. Many times we take on the role in some ways, again, if they're going through some personal issues, sort of as a counselor. But again, if they need true counseling, we're going to be sending them to someone else. We're there as a teacher. We're there to help train them. And we're also there in other roles, mentor and so forth. But at the same time, again, while it sometimes mirror some of the same aspects as far as reflective listening and things like that, we still, it's very different from counseling. The goals are very different. All right, well, let me give you maybe a little harder one here. Let's see if we can find a hard one. How about this? How about this one? A person can become an LPCA, licensed professional counseling associate, with a master's or doctorate degree in clinical psychology. What do you think? And now people are debating, what do I do? So what do you think? A person can become a licensed professional counseling associate with a master's or doctoral degree in clinical psychology. And, we're getting, as I usually get, around half and half. But now it's leaning a little more toward the true. More trues than falses. But at the same time, got a little debate going here. Okay, and I'm going to explain my answer a little bit more later. But in general, the falses here wins. In general, no. A person with a doctorate or master's or doctorate degree that they're using for their qualifying degree cannot become an LPCA. They need, for the most part, training as a counselor, not necessarily as a clinical psychologist. So, anyway, we'll get more into that later as to why that is and so forth. But anyways, just make note of that. All right. Well, let me throw one more out there. How about that? How about this one? Okay, a clinical supervisor can provide some of their supervision over Skype or some other audio visual medium. All right, true or false? A clinical supervisor can provide some of their supervision over Skype. Okay, and I thought this would be harder, but I guess some of you already know about this. But anyways, in our case, for our board, yes, you can. So those that got it true, and it looks like everyone did, yeah, that's true. We do allow for some clinical supervision to be done over Skype, or not necessarily Skype. We're not endorsing any particular type format, but at the same time, audio visual with some kind of good encryption and so forth, but security obviously. But at the same time, yes, they can, and we'll explain how much and so forth later. All right, well, that's sort of a little introduction. Again, one thing is feel free to ask questions as we're going through, and I'll be glad to try to ask that as we go along, or answer that as we go along. All right, let's look at our agenda. Introductions, again, we sort of did that. Actually, you know what? Let me ask this of you guys, at least those of you that can type. What is your license? How many LPCs do we have? LCSWs, psychologists, so forth. Who's on board with us in this training? So I know who I'm talking about. So we got LCSW. Thanks, John. We got Jennifer, LPCC. Cecilia, LPC, Georgiana, LPC, and we got a licensed psychological practitioner in George. All right, thank you, appreciate it. And if any others, feel free to add that to the list. So we got a good mix, and that's good. I'm glad that we can learn from you guys that are not LPCs, and hopefully you can learn more about us as counselors as well in this process. All right, we're going to also look at the Kentucky law and regulations. That's one of the primary goals for this training, and I'm going to spend most of my time actually on that. There has been some recent changes, and we're still looking at possible changes in the future. I'll at least give you a little heads up on some possible, at least some of the discussions of what's happening. Again, there's been some recent being 2012 changes and there's also been some changes just in the last week. So, I mean, literally just a week ago, we have had some changes that occurred. So I'll go over that. You're going to be the first people really to hear about that, some of these recent changes. Even though you may have heard some rumors or something, but all right, and if we have time, we're going to get into some ethics, best practice, and also some, maybe some models of supervision. Again, sometimes I can only touch on that and give you more materials about it, and you can work on that a little bit more. All right, why are we doing this training? Well, the law was changed back in 2010, or actually, I should say not the law, but the regs. That does require this training for anyone that wants to provide supervision to LPCAs. And again, the law covered these areas that I just discussed. I mean, a lot of the Kentucky law and regulations that relate to supervision, we want others that are not LPCCs to sort of understand what the board is looking for in supervision and learn a little bit more about our profession in that sense. But again, keeping up with ethical issues related to supervision and so forth. Here is the law or the regs related to that, and again, it's straightforward. for that, so I won't stay here. One thing I do want to mention too is Don is also going to be sending you a link to this PowerPoint, as well as many other, maybe helpful supervision materials. Feel free to peruse through those and hopefully be able to add those to your own practice as a counselor or as a supervisor. There'll be things like supervision agreements and so forth that hopefully you can use in your practice. So anyway, she'll be sending that out as well when she sends out your certificate. Okay. All right. Thanks, John. Got another LCSW. All right, counselor identity. And this one is, again, as a little introduction to this, let me say that you guys that are, psychologists and LCSWs, you guys have been around a while. And you guys have, in general, I think, a fairly good identity as to what a social worker is or what is a psychologist. And I know there's sometimes that, every profession starts working through that a little bit, but we're the new kids on the block. The counselors have not been around that much or that long, and they're still working through their identity to some degree. And while it's sort of been established in some ways, sometimes to get the law, the licensing law in a particular state, sometimes that has come with some fighting, and sometimes, some states have had to bend to the pressure and not allow certain rights or something. Scope of practice was limited, so forth. So anyways, so you have sort of not a unified identity throughout all the states, like some of you do with, again, I'm looking like a couple social workers here. You guys have been very good at that. Well, we're getting there. And in the process, of course, is having like trainings like this and trying to, even having you guys discuss and what your thoughts are as far as the differences between the professions and the similarities. I mean, there's, again, I think we need to recognize the differences, but also recognize the similarities. There's many things that we can learn from each other, and that we have many times the same goals to provide good therapy and good supervision. But at the same time, there are differences, and it's nothing wrong with seeing that. In fact, even coming to conclusions on those differences might be a good thing. But anyway, so let's get into that as a discussion, and I'm hoping it is a discussion to some degree, again, by asking your questions on the side. So what is an LPCC and what is an LPCA? Again, throughout the country, the primary term would be an LPC, licensed professional counselor. In this state, we've chosen to go with LPCC by putting the clinical title in there. I think some of that has been to distinguish them from other counselors, primarily school counselors, and so to recognize them a little bit different from that. At the same time, I don't have any problem with the LPC title. In fact, that is a title that is really being advocated by the American Counseling Association, that we actually use. At the same time, I don't see that changing. We're gonna maintain our LPCC and LPCA title. Most states do have at least one or two type of licenses, and most of them would have sort of what we have, which is an LPC title and an LPCA title, something that's an associate level, and that's what we have here. So in our case, an LPCC means a credential holder who has been determined by the board to have met all qualifications set forth in the statutes to engage in the independent practice of professional counseling. Again, they have gone through all the supervision, all the training, and so forth. So now that they are that independent practitioner. The LPC, on the other hand, is the same. The only difference is that they are under an approved clinical supervisor that's authorized by the board. And of course, that's why you're here, is to help us and appreciate that. By the way, we very much appreciate you being willing to help with providing supervision for our licensees. So I mean, that's the official title, but the issue is what does that mean? What does practicing professional counseling mean? And this is what our regulations actually state. This is our scope of practice that's in our regulations. So let me read that to you, and let's talk about that. And again, feel free to ask questions. Practice of professional counseling means professional counseling services that involve the application of mental health counseling and developmental principles, methods, and procedures, including assessment, evaluation, treatment planning, amelioration, and remediation of adjustment problems and emotional disorders, to assist individuals or groups to achieve more effective personal, social, educational, or career development and adjustment. So that's our scope of practice, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with your own scope of practice. Many times it may look something similar. One thing that people struggle with at times, and I would say psychologists, the psychology board in general, is that we do have assessment in our title, or in our scope of practice, and that is true. We are allowed to do assessment. Now, actually, I talk about this in another slide. Let me get to that in a minute, actually. But hold on to your, well, feel free to ask those questions, because I want to know specifically what you think. But for example, the psychology board, it hasn't been, I guess it's been like 3-4 years ago, did try to create a law that would allow them to do only assessment. But of course, that's not going to happen. I mean, our law does allow us to, and even if they had a law that restricted others, they can't restrict our profession from doing that. And again, that's I mean, I guess you need to work with assessment. Now, for me personally, I mean, I think the counselor should use assessment. Obviously, assessment is a very simple process to a very complex process. But at the same time, I don't think most counselors should necessarily be doing full-blown psychological assessments. I think they need to rely on good psychologists to do that, and that's my opinion. And I do talk to my own counseling students the same thing. The issue is that counseling, in some ways, goes against having a stopwatch in your hands. And I think that's best done by a professional in which that is their primary objective. Now, there isn't many counselors doing full-blown assessments. There just isn't. I think sometimes some of the fields get worked up about something that's not even a problem. And this is one of those issues. I know of maybe a couple people in the entire state that's doing a lot of assessments. Now, I don't have any problem related to doing assessments related specifically to the counseling profession. So to get a diagnosis, to from a back depression inventory, or some kind of a anxiety inventory, or even a MMPI or something like that. There's nothing wrong for a counselor doing those. Those are there to help them to be able to be a better counselor. At the same time, some kind of projectives, Rorschach and so forth, it's not that they can't do them, it's just I would ask them why. There's people that are better equipped to do that, and to go, to get the training related so much that they have for counseling, and then to take that into assessment, to me is a leap. And to me, I would recommend that they stick with the counseling practice and work with a good psychologist so that they can help. Does that make sense, guys? Again, you need so much training related to some of these instruments, and again, not that we can't do it, but that maybe, again, it's best not to. Does that make any sense? All right. Well, that's good. I'm glad I can make sense on something. Well, again, if you have any more questions, I think there may be another slide or two that will discuss that. But the issue is that we need training. And again, sometimes I think assessment sort of goes against our identity in some ways. Jennifer, you say you have to have certain credentials for testing anyways. Yeah, but your credential is your license. In most cases, it's your independent license. You can buy nearly every and work with nearly any testing instrument with just an independent license. Okay, Jennifer, you say you have to have certain credentials for testing anyways, right? I mean, like IQ testing. And again, you don't. In many ways, your independent license is your ability to buy those instruments and to be able to use them. As long as you've had some type of training, which should be many times in your education, as well as some supervision. Let's say your supervisor was a psychologist and they worked with you in that process, then you should be able to also do that. But again, that doesn't mean that you should. I struggle with counselors actually doing IQ testing, for example, that you give, just because, again, a counselor's there to bond with a client. If you have, say, remember the little blocks, putting those little puzzles together. I mean, a counselor should be there going, yeah, you can do it. That's a counselor. They're not there with a stopwatch saying, stop. I mean, that just goes against who we are, and it's hard to develop a relationship when you shut people down like that. So, does that make any sense? So, in that sense, I'm saying yes, you can, but should you? I really try to restrict people from doing those, if at all possible. All right. Let's see. All right, and then John, you say, I have worked in a variety of settings, and when working, say, in residential with teenagers with an increased level of behavior issues, I have seen testing used to fine-tune, but also have seen it abused or used instead of diagnosis. And yeah, I agree with you, John. There's just a point, again, where, counselors, again, let me just mention that. I mean, counselors, when I look at, say, the differences in some of the professions, I won't name the professions, but there's some professions that are very much medical minded and diagnose driven. Counselors are not. I mean, if we had the choice, we would throw the diagnoses out the window and forget about it. To me, and to most of the counseling profession, we have to work with it because we're required to bill insurance and so forth, but we absolutely cannot stand it and believe that diagnoses, as well as any type labeling to that effect, does more harm than good in most cases. So again, that's sort of we look at things differently. So yeah, in some ways, assessment in the same way. Sometimes assessment is there to put people in little blocks, little boxes, and sometimes that does more harm than good. We would rather just work with people at the relationship level, develop using, developmental type principles, a wellness type model, and that does tremendous good and can make tremendous change in that individual. Working with them as a human being rather than necessarily a label. And I'm sure that is for your profession as well, but we're very strong about that. So, let's see. It seems to be more driven by justifying level of care and funding. Yeah, absolutely, John. It drives me nuts, but at the same time, what can we do? We're dealing in that type world, and we have to work with it. At the same time, um, again, that's the world we're in. All right. Um, Scope of practice again, and this is sort of what I'm saying. Let me go to George here first. Having a psychology background, I agree with the differences that you share between counselors and psychologists. I also believe that there is a role that both can play as it relates to mental health treatment. I'm glad you said that, George, because I completely agree with you. To me, I think that that's the key here, is that we all play different parts. I mean, I see social workers as definitely being in there and working with the systems, and can help with interacting with these systems, the hospital and the hospice and the school system, and they're very good about maneuvering through all these systems that can truly help people. Again, I see that counselor is that independent, that person that can work directly with that individual and counsel them. And to me, they have that training specifically for that. You just look at the training related to a counselor and a social worker. It's very different. Social worker, they're working on poverty and even related to violence in certain categories and social welfare and stuff. You'll never see those classes in a counseling class. We work on, individual counseling theory, techniques specific to that, group counseling, marriage and family counseling, child counseling, addiction counseling. I mean, it's all counseling related. And then what you're talking about with psychology is very true too, where we need to have people that are specialists related to the diagnosis as well as, these psychological assessments. To me, the best arrangement is that you have even group practices that would have a psychologist, a psychological associate, a social worker, and a counselor, and a marriage and family therapist, even, all in the same practice. What a great, service to their area in which everyone's working with each other. John, you say we work in all clinical areas if that is our specialty as a clinical social worker. Oh, absolutely. The issue is that some are better at things than others. I mean, for example, marriage and family therapists, that is their specialty. Now, sometimes they may have got the cart before the horse sometimes, but at the same time, that's a huge area. So in some ways, maybe I would refer them to some people to a marriage and family therapist. Some people would refer them to me as a counselor. And then others, for example, I would send to a social worker. And again, that's where we all need to work well together and to be able to talk about the differences and again, our strengths as well as, again, our differences there. Good point. George, you say, glad you have that mindset, as it sometimes has been a competitive way. Oh, I completely agree, George. I think that it helps the field when we work together, because those outside the field probably have a limited understanding of what discipline specializes. Completely agree, George. We should be working together. Now, there's always going to be a little turf wars going on here and there. But again, we should sort of allow others to play those games, because really we need to think about how that affects the clients and sometimes represents our whole field. I mean, if we get in these battles, and sometimes I think certain professions have become and looked ugly to, I think, the general public as well as to their own membership sometimes, because of the fighting that's going on. So anyways, good points. John, you say, I agree, and also think the internships play an essential role. And I think this has played more of a role in my clinical development than books and supervision. I meant internships and supervision. No, that's a very good point. Sometimes, there is the training, but then there's the real training that happens, like you say, in those internships and the supervision opportunities. And of course, that's why we have this training in many ways. We want, we were seeing that in many ways, counselors, because we've allowed social workers and psychologists and so forth to supervise our LPCAs. They certainly were not. Many social workers and psychologists did not understand our profession. And they were, here at LPCA had all this training related to being a good counselor, and then they're being groomed to be a good psychologist or social worker. And again, we want sometimes that variety. We want, say, for instance, a psychologist to be able to, have our LPCAs to do good assessments, for example. At the same time, we also need them to truly understand the profession that they're in and try to groom them toward that profession to some degree. And that's why we have this training. I mean, that's what this supervision training is about. It's just so you guys understand what they have to do and where they're coming from. John, you say, yes, working on a treatment plan was so important. Absolutely. I mean, again, to me, we should be working, and we are working, I think, toward the, bettering that individual client. And again, we look at maybe the world a little bit differently, looking through different glasses. But that's the point: is none of us have a perfect vision in that aspect, and we all work with each other to actually see the client a little more clear. All right, the issue here again related to our scope of practice is, again, yes, we can do things like testing, hypnosis, and so forth, but we need the training related to that. Our scope of practice allows us to do it. At the same time, just because we're allowed to do some things doesn't mean we should do them. So let's say, for instance, we got a complaint into the board, and it said that so-and-so LPCC was doing assessments, and we do get those complaints all the time. So they're doing an MMPI, and here's an example. I'll give you a complaint. Here's one where a psychologist did an assessment related to a custody battle, and she used the MMPI. I remember specifically, and the judge asked a doctoral level LPCC to evaluate the MMPI done by the psychologist. Well, that pretty much ticked off the psychologist, and they reported that counselor to the board. We did an investigation. We weren't going to just dismiss it right away, but we did the investigation. We found out that he did have the training related to being on for the MMPI. He had his training in his graduate program, but also he had training specific to the MMPI. Not only that, he has a scope of practice that allows him to do that. So in his case, it was just dismissed. The psychologist felt like counselors should not be questioning a psychologist, but in that case, we were, it was justified. And so in that case, the complaint was dropped. There's an example, but again, we would look at, are they an LPCC? If you need to be an LPCC, you need to be independent practice to be able to do most of those assessments and to purchase them. Do they have training related to that, supervision and so forth? And we would look to the manufacturers, the publishers of those tests, and see what the requirements on those. MMPI says independent practitioner is what you need. So in that case, again, it becomes to where, how can you in any way sanction a person that has all the credentials related to that publisher? So that's an example of what would happen. Same with other practice. Somebody said they were a sex therapy specialist, something like that. They said they were that. We would, and then they had a complaint that they were not a specialist in that area. We would do an investigation into that. They need to be competent in the areas in which they're working. And in general, when a person becomes a licensed professional counselor, they are a very good generalist, and they can work with most areas. But we have to work sometimes to add those little extra specialties to be able to work in certain areas. And the field changes over time on those areas as to what is a specialty and what is not. So anyways, that's hopefully that's clear as mud for you guys. All right, the scope of practice. I wanted to mention this, and I just added this to the PowerPoint. And I just wanted to give you a feel for what's going on nationally here. The American Counseling Association, which is our primary national association, working with like 20, 30 other agencies that are counseling-related agencies, like ASPE, which is American Association of State Counseling Boards, which I was just at a conference last week. They're one of the sponsors of this. KCREP's one of the sponsors. There's many, again, counseling-related sponsors. Anyways, they developed a scope of practice that they really would like all of the state boards to adopt. Now, that isn't an easy thing, but at the same time, that is going to be a discussion over time. And so I just wanted to read the discussion, and and hopefully it'll give you an idea, again, where counselors are nationally, and again, this is just a good picture of what counseling is. So let me read that, and it's like 5 slides, so I'll keep going back through those. The independent practice of counseling encompasses the provision of professional counseling services to individuals, groups, families, couples, and organizations through the application of accepted and established mental health counseling principles, methods, procedures, and ethics. Again, right there is saying you can work with a lot of different people, including organizations. Counseling promotes mental health wellness, which includes the achievement of social, career, and emotional development across the lifespan, as well as preventing and treating mental health disorders and providing a crisis intervention. So it's right there. You got a lot of other things. Again, wellness model. You got career counseling in there, working on social issues, emotional issues. You see diagnosis in there. You see prevention in there, treatment, and crisis. I mean, there's so much in those words. All right, counseling includes, but is not limited to, psychotherapy, diagnosis, evaluation, administration of assessments. Again, they're trying to include testing in there, and appraisals, referral, and the establishment of counseling plans for the treatment of individuals, couples, groups, and families with emotional, mental, addiction, and physical disorders. Okay, even including a little bit, again, physical disorders, because they do relate. Counseling encompasses consultation and program evaluation, program administration within and to schools and organizations, and training and supervision of interns, trainees, and pre-licensed counseling professionals through accepted and established principles, methods, procedures, and ethics of counselor supervision. And then last, the practice of counseling does not include functions or practices that are not within the professional's training or education. And again, this would include things like writing prescriptions and so forth. That doesn't relate to who we are as a profession, and it wouldn't include that. So anyways, I just wanted to go over that just to let you know that is where the profession wants to go. That is where we're trying to go. But at the same time, because we all have our state issues, we may not be able to adopt that entirely. But at the same time, maybe one of these days we will try to take our nice paragraph of our scope of practice and then try to incorporate this 4 or 5 paragraph one. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, and here's the question, again, that the board, as well as the profession, has been nationally has been working with, and this is the one that, again, we've sort of been debating a little bit back and forth, but here I'm almost asking for it in some ways. And that is here, can an LCSW or other professional help the LPCA with their identity as a counselor? What do you think? Should LCSWs, licensed psychologists, and more be allowed to supervise LPCAs? Should LPCCs be allowed to supervise LCSWs and LMFTs? What do you think to those questions? And again, if we're going to be consistent, wouldn't we be yes to all of them in some ways? But in some ways, it's it's good for one, but not the other. What do you think? And Jennifer, you say, I think so because they bring another perspective to the LPCA. And again, I think that has been a huge strength, what you're saying, Jennifer, because again, I think seeing, a client, a disorder, a system, an agency through the different lenses of these other professions, I think has been a huge strength for our profession in that way. Jennifer, you say, when I received supervision, mine was an LMFT and an LPCC. Good. So you sort of had best of both worlds, sort of, same profession, but also looking a little different. John, you say definitely. Depends on the profession's experience and training. My training tended to be much more clinical than systems approach. Okay, good. Good, John. Anyone else? What do you think? And again, here's the one problem. Here, let me read John's here. I agree. I have been supervised by all of the above over years and have learned much by PhD, psychologists, and others. Okay, good. And I'll just, as far as me, for example, my supervisor was a clinical psychologist and a child psychologist, as far as that even. And I really gained great benefit working with her. I learned a lot. And so I did not have an LPC in that case, in that state. I did not have that person to supervise me. I had, again, someone outside of that profession. And I thought it was a great experience. Well, okay, George, let's see. I think it can be beneficial by not allowing them to supervise other disciplines. It may create a double standard. I think that with proper training, the LPCCs could supervise in those other areas. Okay, interesting. Okay, now, we're getting another approach. And again, I think George has a good point here. And of course, that's, I'll just give you a little foreshadowing. That's where we're going. I mean, yes, there can be double standards, and that's what's happening now. We have since we become licensed in this state, we have allowed LPCs, or LPCAs, to be supervised by pretty much all the professions, and it's worked well for us. At the same time, there are times when the supervisors really have no clue as to the profession. And there's times, again, where I think LPCCs could provide pretty good training to, LCSWs or psychologists. But at the same time, that's not going to happen. There's no way that LCSWs are going to allow a counselor to supervise them, nor an LMFT to be supervised by anyone other than an LMFT. And whether we like it or not, the profession is going in that direction. We are going to soon be supervisors will have to be LPCCs. Again, I think there's going to be a lot lost in that process, but at the same time, that's where things are going. And I'll go over that in just a second. Again, I think we need to go back as to why. In the very beginning, again, when licensing first occurred for counselors, I think there was a couple things happening. One, there wasn't anyone to supervise. How can you, when you just develop a law and some will become LPCCs, there's no they haven't been LPCs long enough to really do any supervision. So you had to rely on existing professions to do that. Plus, they did not want to get caught in a trap like I think LMFTs have done, in which they're the only ones that can supervise. Because they're the only ones that supervise and there's not many of them, they can't, for lack of a better word, breed. I mean, they can't in that way replicate. They can't grow as a profession very, very quickly. So that's why, in many ways, that the not only the benefits of seeing a client or a disorder through different eyes, different professions' eyes, but also because there was a true need for having, because there wasn't enough supervisors out there. Let's see. I've got John's question here. Let's see. Do you have any thoughts about supervision of any of the above for co-occurring disorders, mental health, and substance abuse? Good question, and don't let me get away with that. Let me finish my thought on this one, and then, let me get to that, John. So that is where it was. I mean, that's where it was when licensure occurred. But here's the difference now, and that's what the board has really been evaluating. Are we there yet? And the question is we have 2,000 licensees. We have enough LPCs to do the job now. So do we start moving in that direction? And the board has decided to move in that direction. So anyway, I'll tell you the specifics on that in a few minutes. Okay, John's question: have you any thoughts about supervision of any of the above for co-occurring disorders, mental health, and substance abuse? Again, good point, John. To me, again, that goes into that specialization. I believe there is. I think. Okay, here now you're getting into my area that I have a little passion about. One is I believe that just the CADCs in our state. Now again, other states are different where they have a tiered licensure system. But in our state, we've allowed people with hardly any training whatsoever to be experts, alleged experts of substance abuse treatment. That's nonsense, in my opinion. They did get the cart before the horse. Without taking one counseling theories class, they've already are an expert in substance abuse counseling, which is nonsense. I believe you should have your generalist license, whether that's an LCSW or a psychologist or again an LPC. You should have that license before you get your specializations, in my opinion. And in this case, yes, if you have the basics and then you work toward having specialized practice, whether that's in a with a certification or not. I'm not necessarily saying you have to have that, but that allows you to be competent in those other areas. And yes, sometimes I see counselors that really don't have the expertise in substance abuse, for example, that they should have, and to be able to supervise others or to be counseling themselves. At the same time, I usually see the opposite, where you see substance abuse counselors that don't even know how to counsel. They have learned one treatment approach, and that treatment approach was a peer-based system in which they went through boot camp on their own because they were struggling with addiction in the past. And again, that's not a professional. And so I have huge respect for those that, again, they may have a CADC, but they have their licensure as their primary. And the issue is that a CADC cannot work with co-occurring disorders. Only a licensed professional can. And then again, we should have some type of training and supervision related to those specialty areas that might include addiction and substance abuse. So does that make sense? Again, I have personally not even gotten a CADC in this state because I've sort of done it in protest. I do have my Master Addiction Counseling National Certification, and I'm licensed in other states as an addiction counselor. But anyways, I think the state is going in the right direction. We're looking toward becoming becoming a state that will have licensure and requiring a master's degree for a 60-hour master's degree for addiction services, but at the same time, that's not will be coming probably later this year. All right, so let's see. Jennifer, you say, so a CDC needs to be an LPCC or some other licensed professional to provide dual diagnosis services. Those with only a CDC could provide CD services, not dual diagnosis. That is absolutely correct. They cannot work with dual diagnosis. Now, do they? Of course they do, but they're doing it against their certification, and they're breaking all of our licensing laws in the process. They are practicing without a license. So that is true. Even their new law that they're going to be developing, which is, I think it's called a licensed clinical substance abuse counselor, the one that they're working on now, and I think it'll pass because now they got the governor behind it too. It says that they cannot provide dual diagnosis treatment. So even with the license from their end, they still will not be able to do it because they're not specifying specific. They're saying a 60-hour master's degree, but because they're not specifying a required standards related to their training, they should not be doing dual diagnosis. And again, it specifically prohibits it in their own law. So let's see, Jason. Yes, it does. I don't have a CADC, but I have a lot of extended training in DAND-A. Not sure what that is. However, where I came from, you had to have a CADC to do treatment, where A and D treatment is primary. Yeah, but that's total baloney in the sense that an agency may require that, but it's just not true. I mean, a CADC, in many ways, the first CADCs were just grandfathered in with zero education requirements, and they didn't even have to take a test. Later, they were grandfathered in with just taking a test. Many of the CADC, there's only, out of the 800 CADCs that there is, there's only 200 of them that have a master's degree. Now that's absurd that we would allow people that have primarily been grandfathered in and having very little education to be doing treatment for mental health treatment. That's nonsense, and we don't. I mean, again, it's in their law and doesn't allow them to do that. George, you say, I think that lately that has been addressed and they are no longer billable. No, they can't bill. That's why they're wanting to go for license, is because they want to be billable. I think that your points are right and on target, because they are actually practicing outside their scope. Absolutely, they don't even have a scope of practice in their current law. And again, it's a certification. It's not a licensing law. When they work with mental health, versus addiction clients. Again, and not only addiction, here's the deal. Their license only allows them to work with, their certification only allows them to work with substance abuse only. And again, they're even distinguishing the difference between alcohol and substances, which is silly in itself, but that's my issue. The issue is other addictions like gambling addictions or food addictions or any of these, they are not qualified whatsoever to work with. Now, again, that might change in their new law, but I don't think they still are trying to use substance abuse, alcohol and substance abuse in their title even. So, but anyways, I would actually encourage you guys, though, to look at the bill. It's already been entered as a pre-bill. You can look on Bill Watch for that's coming up, and feel free to weigh in on that. They've been trying to get it passed for 4 years now, and it should have been actually gone through last year, but I think it will this year. And to me, it's been fairly acceptable to all of us. It's just that again, it went through a evolution there. Can a Master's of Sociology who has a CADC bill Medicaid? As far as I know, no, they cannot. They have to be licensed professionals. They have to be licensed. And again, that's what happened this year. In fact, I've been involved in some of those discussions and some of those debates related to that. a person with a CADC cannot bill, and they're afraid that they're going to lose their edge, and rightly so. Then I looked at them and just said, then daggone, get a master's degree and get your license passed. They have a fight within their own party, and that is, if they require a master's degree, they're having a fight with their own, because a lot of people will feel, okay, now I have a CADC and other people have a license, then I now am no longer on top, and somebody may even have to supervise me. And so, and they're not willing to go back to school. So it's not right now, the current law, or the law that they're trying to pass, is not really counseling, psychology, social work. All of us have sort of agreed we like it the way it is. It should pass the way, if they don't mess with it. The problem is that CADCs have been fighting it. And yet, at the same time, they're not going to be billable, any of them be billable, unless they actually change it to a licensure law. So in sociology, obviously, they went down the wrong path. They're not going to get much with a sociology. Now the issue for them, though, is if they have a master's in sociology with a CADC currently, they will probably be grandfathered in, because they have I think a 2-month window that anyone with a master's degree, no matter what it is, whether it's in business administration or even theology or something like that, they're going to be grandfathered in, which I had to swallow on that. I really do not like it. But at the same time, it wasn't 5 years or something like that, which they were first introducing. Cecilia, you say, I am also a CADC, and I started out in the addictions field. Seeing the need for mental health training is the decision I decided to get my master's in LPCC. It is not possible to provide adequate training or treatment without the training. Absolutely, Cecilia. And to me, see, Cecilia is done it the right way, in a sense. She saw, the lack of training, because again, Cecilia, did you see, for example, that people only saw things through a 12-step model in many cases, and they did not have the training that was out there? In general, it's been a peer-based, CADC has been a peer-based lay system, and they're always going to be the stepchild unless they're able to step up and get the extra training. You have the best of both worlds, in the sense where you have your foundation generalist license that allows you to work with any of them, but then you're saying, hey, I have the CADC, which says I'm a specialist in addiction treatment. So good for you. All right, well, I've spent a lot of time on that. But anyways, I think it's important, though, and got off the topic a little bit, but at the same time, I think it affects all of us, whether we're CADCs, LCSWs, psychologists, or all. I think we need to make sure that all of us doing this are there for the protection of the public, and the protection of the public requires a daggone master's degree, some level of professionalization for all these fields to be able to work. And I think what has happened is people, they see the addiction field and see this, they feel that it's almost magic. Oh my gosh, there's spirituality and stuff in that, and I don't want to touch that. The issue is we should be touching it. That should be an area that licensed professionals should be working. You're working with it anyways, because a lot of your people have addiction issues too. We might as well work with them and understand that. But at the same time, people that do not have training in basic counseling skills, treatment approaches, no assessment related to being in a accredited program, is just nonsense. We can't allow that, and it really puts our state down when we do not have those kind of credentials. My opinion, again, I'm a little outspoken on that. All right, let's go beyond. Let's now look at what you have to do to become an LPCA. And what do you need? First, you need to go to the website. You can, and again, I have it there in front of you, lpc.ky.gov. This is a website. Again, it's pretty open, pretty explanatory. You can find the regulations. You can find all the forms there. And feel free to look at those, because I think it's important for you, even as a supervisor, to know what your LPC is filling out and what's required to be a counselor. The application there, again, all the practicum and internship forms they need to fill out, that's related to, that's in the back of the application, and to that they need to fill out, and to who did their, who was the, and even have supervisors sign that, that was in their practicum and internship. Need to provide their transcript, obviously, fill out the application and give them, state always wants their money. And then the supervision agreement. And their supervision agreement is what you're going to be signing as a supervisor. This is what you're saying that you're going to be doing and working with that LPCA. That LPCA will have two primary areas that they're going to fill out. One is what they're going to be doing as a counselor. And then the second area is what are they going to be doing in supervision with you. So before you sign it, I would actually have them fill it out first. I mean, sometimes people will, they'll sign that before the person completes it. And unfortunately, it's maybe not what they were thinking would be done in supervision or something like that. Here's when I put tips and red flags, here's some of the issues that gets some of the supervision agreements or even their application rejected. One of the primary ones is related to the supervision agreement, where they will state something like, I will be working with children, and that's all they have. And they don't say counseling. I mean, a lot of people can be working with children, but that doesn't mean they're doing counseling services. I want to hear that they're working with children on an individual basis and doing treatment plans. And, we need to hear what they're doing that relates to our scope of practice as a professional counselor. Just saying that you work with children or you work with people with mental health concerns does not in any way tell us as a board what the person is doing. Does that make sense? George, could you say that again? You were breaking up during the last paragraph. Sure. The issue is just that it should relate in some ways. When you're under supervision for another person, it should relate to the scope of practice as a counselor. Sometimes people will write things down that relates to their primary job, which is, say, a case manager. Well, we don't care what you do as a case manager. It does not relate to your supervision. Your supervision should relate to counseling services. It should relate to what are you doing as a counselor. Are you providing individual supervision, couples counseling, individual counseling, couples? Are you doing psychoeducational groups? What are you doing as a counselor? Not what you're doing as a pastor, what you're doing as an enrollment coordinator, what you're doing as a recruiter, what you're doing as a case manager. None of those things apply. We want to hear what you're doing as a counselor, and that is what you should be supervising about. So let me give an example. Can a person be a case manager and still become an LPCA? Absolutely. The issue is that they better be doing counseling on the side after hours or whatever. And when they write down what they'll be doing as a counselor, do it as a counselor, not as a case manager. So that's what we want to see on the form, is what they're doing as a counselor, not as their other job. Does that make sense? I hope. We get that all the time. And it's just rather frustrating, So anyways, sometimes especially, they just don't know what they're saying. They get caught up in the lingo of like working with, or I will have a caseload of. I don't care what your caseload is. What are you going to be doing with that caseload? That kind of thing. So anyways, hopefully that helps. Let's see, what else? I guess the biggest thing is just related to their education, and really that comes up next here. We need to make sure when we're looking at their application that they have a qualifying degree. And to have a qualifying degree, in reality, we're making it to where it needs to be a counseling degree. And not just a counseling degree. It needs to have specific requirements in that counseling degree. And there's certain degrees that just does not work. And psychology, clinical psychology, social work, criminal justice, special education, any of those degrees just will not work. And that's why, when we had that little poll in the beginning, why I said it wouldn't work. So in the past, before I was on the board, and again, it sort of was a hodgepodge degree, and I think that our professionalization wasn't up to where it should be. And we've tried to change that. So in that way, if a person tries to go up to the psychology board and just can't become a psychologist, well, dang, we really feel bad about that. But you cannot come to the counseling board thinking that now you can just move into our degree. Our profession. That doesn't work. We'll send you right back to psychology. If your training is in psychology, you should be going to your psychology board, making sure that you have been adequately mentored and advised in your program of study, and hopefully it guides you toward the direction that you want to go. Same to social work. People that want to become a social worker, and if they do not get the correct, they went into sociology, someone mentioned before, and they thought that was what they needed to become a social worker. Well, guess what? It doesn't, and social work will deny their license. We will also deny their license. It isn't for it's not a counseling degree. They didn't go into a mental health counseling degree. They need that if they want to become licensed. Now, we do have two routes. We do have the counseling degree or a related degree. The issue is that our related degree, in many ways, we've tried to make that to where it has to mirror very closely to being a counseling degree. They have to have most everything to do that. John, you say, I have an ABD in research psychology and have had to jump off and get a MSW to do the work I wanted to do. Yeah, exactly. And, I think, it's really frustrating, again, because I think some colleges and universities they have so many recruiters, and they're guiding people into these sexy degrees, forensic psychology, forensic counseling, sports this or whatever. And unfortunately, some of those sound really cool, but they do not lead to anywhere. You will not get a job. You will not get a license. And we're dealing with that on the board every week or every month. Our board meeting is this Friday. And I'll see it again, where you have all these degrees that look sexy, and that people got caught up in this great, ad on the internet, and seeing these cool people jumping around with a diploma in their hand. Unfortunately, once they get that diploma, they can't do anything with it. It literally is a couple letters behind their back, the back of their name, but it means nothing. You will not be able to, get licensed. You will not be able to bill insurance, and that was their goal. So it's really frustrating when I have people that go into general psychology, and they'll get a master's in general psychology or whatever, like you say, research psychology. John, great professions in many ways. At the same time, they can't get licensed and want to do what they were trying to do in the process. So, anyways, just be aware of that people that are coming in to become licensed we have restricted it considerably from a few years ago, and we're restricting it even more. And what do I mean by that? It's the next slide. And that is a new regulation that just took effect this January. And it says this: applicants shall have a degree from a program that is accredited by the Council on Accreditation of Counseling and Related Programs, which is CACREP. This requirement shall not apply to an applicant who is enrolled in a counseling or related field program on or before January 15, 2015. B, maintains continuous enrollment and receives a degree in a counseling or related field program no later than May 31st, 2020. So here's the deal. If a person is in a non-accredited non-KCREP accredited program now, or any time before now, they'll be fine. They should be fine as long as it meets the other standards. But at the same time, and again, it has to be somewhat counseling related. But if they're not, they're going to be using a degree in the future, and they haven't enrolled by now, the 15th, by tomorrow, then it's not going to happen. They need to have a KCREP degree. Okay, so does that make sense? I just want everyone to. This is a very difficult. Kentucky now and Ohio are the only ones that are starting to go in that direction. This is a very new thing. This just happened. Okay, in fact, it's not even on the website yet. We're getting ready to send letters to all licensees and all supervisors related to this, just so everyone understands this. Again, it doesn't affect people that are already licensed. It doesn't affect people that are in a program now and finishing up. It'll only affect people in the future, and really after 2017, for example. That's where it'll start affecting people. We are just getting to a place like social work and psychology has gone before us, where they say, this is our educational requirements. Yes, people don't like some of it, and it really creates a problem for some, but this is the way it is, and we have to have standards for our profession, and that's what we're doing here too. Jennifer, you say undergraduate programs should also be aware of this when helping guide people. Absolutely, I agree with you, Jennifer, and that's where I think this advising has to happen also at the high school level even. When people say, I want to be a counselor, they need to be guided in the right direction. And again, they get caught up in these, especially for-profit schools that are just ready to grab them and talk about, again, a sexy degree. And it sounds so cool, but yet at the same time, it really places them and puts them in debt for $100,000 and in a degree that goes nowhere. And it really is frustrating for me as a counseling educator to see. And as a board member to see, because I see it every daggone time, and it's frustrating because I feel for these people. I'd love to give them a license, but I can't. It wouldn't be right for the profession. All right, yeah, and when you finish, impact those going to, yeah, I know, it's really very frustrating. So anyways, be aware of this. Virginia's going this direction also. And many other states are also contemplating it. I'm going to be talking at the American Counseling Association in a panel on that actually this March, and we're going to be discussing how other states can go in this direction as well. All states want to go in this direction to some degree. The issue is that some of the schools that are non-accredited are fighting it, obviously. But in our state, we have we have some good programs. So. All right, hopefully that makes sense, guys. Clinical supervision. I'll tell you what, let's see. No, let me go a little bit further. What I'm planning on doing is that right at 10:30 or so, we'll take a break for 15 minutes. I'll come back and we'll get going again. But let's keep going for another 5 minutes or so, okay? So clinical supervision. Again, in our current law, supervisors need to be credentialed in one of the following professions. They have to be Kentucky law too. It can't be that they're a licensed psychologist in Ohio. They have to be Kentucky law. So they have to be either a licensed professional clinical counselor, a licensed psychologist or a certified psychologist with autonomous functioning, a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed psychiatrist, a nurse with a master's degree in psychiatric certification, or a marriage and family therapist. So again, what I've mentioned before is we have allowed all these great professions to be able to supervise. But again, as I mentioned earlier, and with a little foreknowledge, this is changing. After January 1st of 2016, a supervisor, this is the new regulation that just passed a few days ago, 1 week ago, a supervisor shall be licensed by the board as a licensed professional clinical counselor. And so we are going to that in that direction of 2016 being only LPCCs that will do the supervision for new applications. Now that's what I want you guys to understand. All existing applications will stay in effect. So here it says supervision agreements that have been approved prior to that date that involved other licensees listed, and again I just mentioned those titles, may continue to in effect until termination. Again, you're going to continue those that are LCSWs and so on, as long as the supervision agreement has been in effect prior to 2016. You're fine. You'll continue that until the person is, becomes an LPCC or terminated in another way. Now, there's some exceptions here. An applicant may submit a hardship request for the ability to utilize one of the licensees under. So in other words, if they're in an agency, for example, and there's just no one, there's not an LPCC around to supervise them, and it would create a hardship on their part to actually get an outside supervisor, for example, they can request from the board and to have someone from the other professions we just mentioned, LCSW, psychologists, to be their supervisor. Those will be given out liberally. We wanted to make that very liberal process. And here it just, where the nature and circumstances shows the ability to obtain supervision from a licensed professional clinical counselor is prohibited by the difficulty to do so. The submittal of for a hardship exemption shall be accompanied by the supervision agreement. So anyways, so there's two things. Again, one, we're going in that direction where only LPCCs will be supervising. Two, we're going to a place all existing supervision agreements will continue to continue to stay in effect until termination. And three, there will always be a hardship request that will be accepted if the person asks, for the most part. Now, the only other point, let's see. What was I going to say here? Oh, the other, why are we going this direction? Okay, here's something that everyone should be aware of, and then we'll take a break. Is that this is being brought out by national trends. Most states are going in this direction or have gone in this direction. The other thing is insurance. I mean, we're talking about TRICARE specifically, and in some cases Medicare and other places. They are and some insurance companies are starting to adopt those same principles, and that is that the person that would provide like TRICARE services has to have had supervision by a mental health counselor. So that creates a real dilemma for us when we allow others to supervise, or when people are continuing to be supervised by other professions, they are limiting their ability of their future to be able to take certain insurance companies, and TRICARE is one of those. They will never be able to take TRICARE if they continue down the road of allowing another person to supervise them. So that is why it's happening in many ways, is to try to go, we're going with that trend that's been happening, whether we like it or not. But we also don't want to leave our licensees in many ways out in the wind. They need to be aware of what's going on nationally. I mean, when you have a federal government that's making these policies, you you know, you can fight them to some degree, but at the same time, sometimes you just need to, you know, accept it and go with the way that trend is going. Anyways, that's a new regulation, and I'll just leave it there and let's take a break. Let's all get back together. Let me see. George has got a real quick question here. Has the changes with the implementation of Affordable Care Act sped up the process of moving in that direction? Absolutely. I mean, that's also been a huge factor because there is, you know, indications in many cases that, again, it's not just the TRICARE, but it's also some of these other Medicaid-driven programs that are also adopting those same principles of sometimes KCREP accreditation for their educational program, and then second, that they have been supervised by their own profession, which is again an LPCC for our profession. So yeah, absolutely, good point, George. All right, well, I'm going to leave it there. Let's come back at 10:45.